So today we'll talk more about fraction and decimal equivalencies. You will need paper, pencil, and maybe some crayons and markers if you want to make fancy flashcards for an activity that we'll do later in the lesson. Our learning target for today is I can use money to relate fractions to decimals. So while you're grabbing those resources that I just talked about, paper, pencil, maybe crayons and markers, I'll go to the next slide. You can pause the video and start it again when you get back. What you see in front of you are some fraction strips. And as we always do with our fractions and our decimals, we have determined what our whole will be today. Our whole is represented by a $1 bill, and you see that at the top. So I'll go ahead and write that in. This is our one whole, $1 bill. And so I also have some coins down at the bottom. So you see a dime, you see a quarter, and you also see a nickel. Let's start from the bottom and work our way up. So that bottom fraction strip has been divided into 10 sections. So knowing what you know about fractions, what would our denominator be? If you said 10, because there are 10 sections in all, you're absolutely correct. So if we think about just that one section that's shaded in green, what would our numerator be? If you said 1, you're right again. So our fraction that represents that green section that's shaded in is 1/10. So we can use money to determine what 1/10 looks like as a decimal. So think about the coins that you see down the bottom. Which coin could we put into each of these 10 sections and it would equal $1? Take a moment to think about that. Did you guess a dime? Let's try it out. You can count along as I'm putting each dime into its section to make sure that it equals $1. Because remember, $1 is our whole. You were right. So 1 dime fits into each section and it equals $1. Okay, so that's going to help us to determine how can we write 1/10 as a decimal? Because we know that money is represented as a decimal. So this dime is worth how much money? 10 cents, right? So 1/10 is equal to 10 cents. No holes, because we don't have one whole dollar in that one green shaded section. We've got 10 cents in there. Take a moment to take a look at that. And think about 2/10. How would we represent 2/10? Okay, so my question was 2/10. If we had 2/10 as our fraction, how could we use our dimes to help us to determine what 2/10 would look like as a decimal? So 1/10 is equal to 1 dime or 10 cents. So 2/10 would be equal to 2 dimes or 10 20 cents, just to get you in the feel of how we're going to use this money. So now I want you to think about the fraction strip that's right above the 10th fraction strip. How many sections is it divided into? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So what would our denominator be? 5 sections in all. And how many are shaded in green? 1 section. So these are fifths. That's 1/5, that's 2/5, that's 3/5, that's 4/5, and that's 5/5. I want you to use what we see in our 10th fraction strip to determine how much would 1/5 be valued at. And while you're thinking about that, you can pause the video. Give yourself a chance to think about how do those dimes help us to determine how much this green section is valued at. Did you say 20 cents? You're absolutely correct, because these 2 dimes are in a section that's equivalent to this green section. And those 2 dimes would be equal to 20 cents. Good job. So go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to go get your paper or get your paper prepared to make a flashcard. Now I'm going to go to the next screen. So go ahead and pause the video, get your markers if you want to use markers or crayons, and make sure that you have a pencil as well. So here are my flashcards. I hope you have yours. We're going to start with tenths because that's a fraction that we've started with. So I'm going to write in this very first flashcard 1/10. Which was 1 dime. So when we think of tenths, we think of dimes. And how much was 1 dime worth? 10 cents, right? And we wrote that like this. The money helps us, but I'm not gonna always have that dollar sign in front because I'm not gonna always be talking about money. So I'm just gonna write tenths, that 1/10, just like this, 10 hundredths, just like we showed it before, because that 10 cents represents 10 out of that whole dollar, 10 out of 100 cents. And so 2 tenths could have been represented by 2 dimes, which is 20 cents. So my second flashcard looks like this. 20 cents. So if I had that dollar sign right there, that would look just like 20 cents. So I'm going to continue to make my flashcards, and I want you to continue to make yours too. And if you want yours to be fancy, you want to decorate them, you can do that right after we're finished with this lesson. But for right now, I just want you to write your fractions and your decimals on your flashcards. We can do them together. Three tenths was equal to 3 dimes. And I'm just going to talk through it. Just a reminder that whenever I'm thinking about tenths, I'm going to be thinking about dimes. 4 tenths. Keep making your flashcards. So you've got 5 tenths, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, 8 tenths, 9 tenths, and 10 tenths left. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that slide that has our dimes on it, and it'll help you to finish making your flashcards. Pause the video if you need to. So let's make our second flashcard. Let's make a flashcard for 2/5. So remember we just talked about 2/5. Ended up being about 4 of those dimes. And so 4 dimes is equal to 40 cents. And so I'm going to write in our fractions on each of our flashcards. And then I'm going to go back to the page that has our fraction strips and our money on it, just in case you need that help in determining which fractions and decimals are equivalent. I think you know this one already. 5/5 was that whole model, that whole thing, and we said that our whole was equal to $1. Okay, I'm going to pause the video, and when we come back, we'll be at the page that has our money on it. But in the meanwhile, you can make sure that you have all of your flashcards set up so that you're ready to go. And we're back. So 1/5 was 20 cents, 2/5 is 40 cents, 3/5 would be 6 of these dimes, which would be 60 cents. 4/5 would be all of these sections that stop right here. So all of these dimes, that's 8 dimes, that would be 80 cents. And 5/5 would be the whole dollar. So 5/5 equals one whole dollar. I'll give you a second to get those fractions and your decimals written on your flashcards. And you can pause the video if you need to. And so now I want to jump up to the top part. So that, and we're going to start at the bottom again. I think that will be really helpful. So that bottom fraction strip is divided into 4 sections. And so again, using all of our good knowledge about fractions, 4 sections in all means that 4 is our denominator. And we've got one of those sections shaded in, one section. So I want you to think about the money amounts, the coins that we have at the bottom. Keep in mind, we've got a dime, we've got a quarter, and we've got a nickel. I want you to think of which coin could we use 4 of to equal $1. Pause the video if you need a chance to think about that. Would 4 dimes equal $1? 4 quarters equal $1? Or will 4 nickels equal $1? Well, I think we already know we can rule out the 4 dimes because we know that's 40 cents. And nickels are less than dimes, so that's going to be even less than 40 cents. It's probably going to be, it actually is 20 cents. So let's try our quarters. If we put a quarter into each of these sections, and I know you know a lot about skip counting, so skip count with me. 25, 50, 75, $1. But one of these quarters, one of these 4 quarters is equivalent to how much money? Take a second to think about that. It's 25 cents, right? So when we think about how we write 25 cents, again, 25 cents. No whole dollars. It's 25 out of all of the 100 cents that equals $1. So 25 cents looks like that. So let's just go through this. 1/4 equals 1/4 or 25 cents. So 2/4 would equal 2 quarters or 50 cents. 3/4 would equal 3 quarters or 75 cents. And 4/4 would equal one whole dollar. So we're going to use that knowledge to help us think about when we divide our dollar into half, into 2 sections, like you see above the quarters. So think about that. It looks a lot like what we did down the bottom. So if we put these 2 quarters together, it's just like putting these 2 sections together, which gives us 2 quarters is 50 cents. So let's write that in. 2 of the quarters. And it equals 50 cents. But it's not just 2 quarters. We've got 2 sections. 2 sections. And we only have one of those sections shaded in green. So 1/2 is our fraction, 1 out of 2. And if 2 quarters are in that green section, 2 quarters, how much is that? 50 cents. It's a half a dollar. And 50 cents. 50 out of the 100 cents that makes up a dollar, because you know that 100 pennies makes up a dollar. 50 of those 100 pennies is equal to a half a dollar, 1/2 of a dollar, 1/2. Okay, so you can go ahead and pause, and I'll have you back at your flashcard page, and we'll continue to make our flashcards. I'll start you off, but again, make sure that you have all of the materials that you need, because we're going to stay on that page now. So we're back at making flashcards, and we've got 2 now. So which fractions are you thinking we're going to work with? Halves? You're right. 1/2 of that dollar was 50 cents. A half of a dollar is 50 cents. And keep in mind, we're not just using, money all the time for decimals. The money just helps us to think about what the decimal will be. And then if we had 2 of the sections with all of the money in it, so 2 50 cents, that would equal the whole dollar. Because remember, our whole was our dollar. I'll give you a second to make those flashcards, and we'll come back, and our next set of flashcards will be our fourths. So we're back. We're on our fourths page, and I'm going to switch it up a little bit and use green this time. Green for money. So 1/4, and we said that it would be worth our time to use our quarters for our fourths, because 4 quarters equals a dollar. And so one of those 4 equaled 25 cents. 25 out of the 100 cents, that equals a dollar. And then 2/4 would be 2 quarters, and 2 quarters is equal to 50 cents. And then 3/4 or 3 quarters was equal to 75 cents. And 4 quarters, 4/4 is equal to 1 whole dollar. And so you can pause the video if you need to spend a little more time making your flashcards. Our next activity is a game. So you might want to have your flashcards all ready to help you with the game. Finish those flashcards and come back. So hopefully you have all of your flashcards made. Okay, so hopefully you have all of your flashcards made. I would suggest that you have them spread out in front of you while we play the game. I'm going to go ahead and set the game up again. And I'm just going to run through all of the flashcards. I'll just spin and you can play.